I'm getting kind of chills. Like, that's kind of freaky, that picture up there.
Yeah, so that's her and her two dolls. And it went to court. And I'll tell you what, if you read like some of the newspaper stories, I think everybody was a little kooky in this one.
She was charged with double murder. You heard that there. That is Deputy Executive Director of the History Museum, Kristie Erickson, and I on the floor of the museum talking about one of the creepy stories told in their Indiana lore exhibit. More of that later, but first, welcome to Round the Bend Now and Then, a podcast that shines a light on the South Bend and Mishawaka areas past and present. Through interviews with local business owners, leaders, and community members, our listeners and I learn together about all of the great people and great things going on in our community, as we also learn about South Bend and Mishawaka's history and how intertwined our past is with our present. The Northern Indiana Historical Society, the Northern Indiana Center for History, the Center for History, and now known as the History Museum. It's seen many changes in its almost 150-year existence, but one thing is for sure, the entire St. Joseph County area is blessed to have the second oldest and second largest historical society in the state, right here in our own backyard, the History Museum. You see, I'm not a big Ohio State fan at all, and I get very annoyed when Ohio State fans call it the Ohio State. But our museum here, it is the History Museum because it is the main hub for a great majority of our local history. Just listen to this brief description from their website, and it'll sum up how much the History Museum does for our area. Since we started collecting our community's history, we have accumulated photographs, architectural drawings and blueprints, manuscripts, personal papers, ethnic immigrant papers and documents, business industrial papers and documents, advertising, locally published newspapers dating back to 1830, scrapbooks, military records, bound volumes, and audio, video, and film footage. Again, the History Museum is the central hub for everything history in our area. Their vision is, we will cultivate an inspired community with an expanded knowledge, understanding, and passion for our past in order to appreciate the present and influence our future. You see, understanding how important our past is to our present and how much of an impact that can have on our future is one of the main themes that I have tried to push on this podcast. So it was natural that I wanted to highlight our local museum and shine a light on how much it does for our community. So in this episode, I meet with the Deputy Executive Director of the History Museum, Kristie Erickson. We start our talk in her museum office, deep in the bowels of the History Museum, where we talk about everything the museum has to offer, as well as things that go on behind the scenes to bring the beautiful exhibits to life. And we end our chat actually walking on the museum floor, highlighting some of their cool exhibits. So sit back, enjoy, and learn all about why you and your family should take in everything that the History Museum has to offer. Kristie, thank you so much for joining us on Round the Bend Now and Then. Truly appreciate it. Before we dive into the museum and everything, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Kristie Erickson. I'm Deputy Executive Director here at the History Museum.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you want to know about me? I was born 40 years ago at Memorial Hospital here in South Bend. So I've been a local resident my whole life, and I've been working here at the museum for 15 years. So started as actually a temp.
Okay.
And they extended that a few times. And I guess I must have done an okay job because here I am. But ended up curator of the Oliver Mansion, Kopsha Home here on the corner.
Yep.
And I'm now Deputy Executive Director.
That's awesome.
What does that
Awesome.
mean?
That's kind of the next question. What is it? Everything under the sun?
A little bit of everything. Your job description always says other duties as,
Of course.
other duties as assigned.
As assigned. Yep.
But technically, it means that I oversee our curators, our education department, and our exhibits department.
Okay.
And then
That's a
also, if our director is incapacitated in some way, I assume the powers,
Right.
Highlander style.
Right. Take over.
Yes, but we all end up doing a little bit of everything around here. So
Teamwork.
yeah,
What high school did you go to around here?
I went to Penn High School, so we moved to Mishawaka.
Okay.
And that's where I grew up over by AM General.
Okay. Nice. What would you say is the most joyous aspect of your job?
Oh, that is a great question. I like the word joyous there because the things that I really like about being here at the museum really are joyous.
Awesome.
And there's two things that kind of make it all worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And one happens a little more often than the other.
Okay.
But what I hear a lot from people when you do an exhibit or when you do a public program is they say, I was never all that interested in history, but now that I'm learning more about it and I really love it and I love coming here. And that's both makes me happy and makes me wonder what we're doing wrong with young people.
Yeah.
But young people maybe don't have as much perspective about why it's important to them. But
that has to be a great feeling though, when you even if you're just walking past somebody and they just candidly say, wow.
I was never interested in that, but you make it so interesting that I want to know more. The other thing that happens once in a while is since we are representing, our community's history and local people's family history, on occasion somebody comes here to see a family member highlighted in one of our exhibits and are so moved by seeing that that it's wonderful to talk to them about that. And
that's neat.
So
because it personalizes it.
Yeah.
Too often we think of history maybe as so far disconnected from who we are in the day to day, but man, if there's family members that personalizes it,
Yeah.
That's cool. That's
And,
neat.
Recently we have something up right now about a woman named Rosemary Sanders, who was the first African-American person to play in the South Bend Symphony.
Nice.
And she was never in a program. She was never acknowledged. She wasn't allowed to be in the formal photos. And so we did this exhibit, and it's, large on the wall.
Yeah.
Her daughter came here from Las Vegas to see it and started crying.
Of course.
All this time, mother is finally acknowledged for her achievements. And
that's cool.
It makes it all worthwhile.
That is so neat, though. That is so cool. Well, now the opposite. What would you say are some of the more challenging aspects of your job?
Ooh. There's always a few, and every job has similar challenges.
Yeah.
But museums tend to rely a little bit on the passions of people that work there.
Yep.
And it's a little bit easy to get into wearing a lot of hats
Right.
and oh, you know how to do this thing? Well, that's your job now.
Yeah.
And you want to make the place you work the best place it can possibly be and serve the people who come here as best you can. And
Right.
so it's can sometimes be hard to find that balance.
Yeah.
Of, well, I
Yep.
guess I can do that too.
Yep.
So
Yeah, anytime you're in the people business, everybody has different passions and everything,
and everybody has different opinions on.
You are very, very correct. As a museum, people frequently probably clean out their basements. They probably frequently run across a family heirloom. They don't want to throw it away, so I'm sure they reach out.
Oh, for sure.
What are some of the more strange donation requests, if you can recall, over the years? Can you think of any?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Yes, and I don't want to belittle too many of these too much.
Oh,
because
no,
of course they're important to that person.
Absolutely.
But then sometimes we just get an anonymous envelope full of pencils, and okay,
Right.
not sure what to do with this.
Yep.
But once somebody came in with what he swore up and down was a copy of the Declaration of Independence. Wow, wouldn't that be great?
In South Bend, Indiana here, yeah.
Yes, he found this at a garage sale, I think.
Right.
It's okay. Well, sir, if you look at the back, you'll see it says Kodak.
Yes.
It's,
right, reproduced.
Let's see. Those are my two favorites. We actually do keep track of how many Singer sewing machines we get offered every year.
Really?
We
Because it
have
was here.
so many.
Wow.
And everyone has one. And
Yeah.
they're beautiful and lovely. And we're usually pretty good on those.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you have a team, a committee, anything like to create the exhibits? And so how does that work out? Like how do you decide on it? How do you put it together?
Yeah, everything's a team effort
Okay.
here. And so when we're putting exhibits together, we have a committee, and it's a pretty large one, and includes most of our staff because there's just so many aspects to exhibits.
Okay.
You've got your marketing team because you need to talk about.
I didn't even think of that. That's a great,
Yeah, what do you think people will be interested in, and how will we promote it, and what kind of public programming can go along with that. But then we've got, our exhibits person and our education team, how can we get this to the schools and how can that be put together? But then also, do we have enough stuff to do this exhibit? What do we know about this topic? Is that even feasible for us to do? And so sometimes somebody approaches us with an idea and says, I have these things and I'd like to work with you.
Right.
Sometimes we'll be somewhere at another museum and get an idea.
Light bulbs going off in your head. Yeah.
So we've got this running list of exhibit ideas. Is there an anniversary coming up soon? Is there...
Makes sense.
You just wake up in the morning and say, Skylar Colfax or
of course.
Something like that. So
that's it takes great. You're not just putting an artifact in the corner. I mean, because you want to market it, you want to educate folks, you want to make sure it's engaging and make sure folks want to see it. So I'm sure it's not easy to put it all together.
Different folks want to see different things. So
and it's hard to please everybody.
To me might not be interesting to my parents or
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. You don't even think about all that it takes to create an engaging museum exhibit. It takes the collaborative effort of the whole team. Now, many of you who follow me on social media know that I love to collect and share old pictures of our area. I think it leads to great comments and conversation, as well as help us understand how our area has changed over the years. The History Museum will share some unbelievably awesome pictures from our past on their socials. And next, I encourage, actually, I'm kind of pleading and begging Kristie to release more. Now, and I love old pictures of our area. I've always collected old pictures, and now that we're digital, I have folders for everything. And man, the History Museum online or Twitter or Facebook will tweet, Travis will here and there, some awesome pictures. Now, do you guys have a ton more? Are you hoarding them and just releasing them every week or what? Because if you have more, release them.
So we have, I want to say about 25,000 pictures in our collection. Some are more interesting than others.
Right.
But we actually are working on an initiative to have all of those available online for people to kind of browse through. It's a lot of work.
Oh, absolutely. Work, resources, time.
But so we're working on digitizing our archival collection slowly. We actually started with everything relating to Skylar Colfax being a very important person and us having a lot of stuff. So that's kind of a concrete.
That's what you prioritize there.
Little chunk to get used to the process and how you're going to do it.
I see.
me and my team have been talking a lot about what to do next and how to do that.
Right.
And so, for example, we have, much like the library we also got quite a few pictures from the South Bend Tribune that Travis has been scanning, and I'd like to get those up pretty soon. But then we also want people to keep coming back, so we can point them just a little bit.
Of course, you want to wet their beak and get them coming back.
Follow us on social media.
Right, that's true too. But even just pictures of streets, I love it. I don't know. That's just the history nerd in me. I just love it. I'll go out and take a picture of it now and compare it to then and everything.
Sure.
So, yep, keep sharing. And if you need somebody to come and look at them, let me know. When Kristie said they have around 25,000 pictures in their collection, I about lost it. And again, if you need any help digitizing some of those photos, let me know. Next, we talk about one of the more popular exhibits right now in the museum. And folks my age, just think along the lines of Primrose. What would you say currently? What's your most popular exhibit now?
Now? Well, our changing gallery, which is kind of our big one, the one that we put the most time into marketing, is always our most popular exhibit because, we put the most effort into it. And right now it's something called Indiana Lore.
Talk to me.
Which is a little bit of mostly it's a traveling exhibit that we got from the Indiana Historical Society. And added a lot of more local information on myths and legends and haunted buildings and
I see.
Things like that in Indiana, but also in St. Joseph County and the surrounding areas. So you can learn a little bit about the Ghost of Washington Hall or
Notre Dame.
Belle Guinness over in LaPorte or I like the Beast of Churubusco that is this giant turtle that supposedly lived in this lake. And this man spent all this time draining this lake to find this giant beast, and there was never anything there. But it's got this really great artwork that comes with it. And it's always fun to kind of think about, well, maybe it's true.
Right. When I was in high school, there was a school northwest side. It was an old school building. It was a lore. Oh, what was that called? Primrose?
That's in there.
I think. Oh, is that in there? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's all kind of, well, if you drive too slow, your car will break down.
Yes. Yep. There's another one somewhere on railroad tracks, like your car will go off the tracks or something. Who knows? But yep. So the most of the traveling, most of the what did you call the exhibits that are?
We call it our changing exhibits.
Changing exhibits. So most of those end up being fairly popular just because of all the work and effort that goes into creating, to marketing them.
And the promotion.
And the promotion.
Quite frankly, continually our most popular offering is the Oliver Mansion.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely.
So,
yep, definitely. In general, man, why do you think it is so important that our just local history is preserved and shared?
I have a lot of opinions about that, but as you always say, and in our mission, you use knowledge about the past to make informed decisions about the future. So whether that's mistakes of people in the past or you're inspired by people of the past, all of those things are so important for people to learn about and to consider when they're kind of making their life choices. So, or to understand why we have, preservation initiatives in town, or when you're driving down the street and, what's this building? Well, let me tell you all that. But I always say that the more you know about something, the more you want to know about something. And
that's true.
It's true. And I went to school for archaeology.
Okay.
And I wanted to be an underwater archaeologist. Okay. So that's what I did my master's work on. And now I'm here, telling people about, let me tell you about this boxer that was a woman in town in the 50s. And it was so cool and never thought that I would be so interested in local history, but the more you learn about it, the more you want to learn about it. The more passionate you get about it. And
more confident.
The people that go before you and the risks that they take and the things that they achieve. And maybe you can do that too. So So that's what I like about it.
Absolutely. I mean, our learning from our past helps dictate the future and everything. And so, again, that is one of the main missions of the History Museum, is to make sure that we understand how important it is to understand our history, since it has such a bearing on our future. As our listeners have learned on this podcast, our past, our present, our future are all intertwined. If you can meet anyone from the South Bend area's past, who would that be and why?
That's
a hard one.
That's a hard one, and I'd probably have to make a short list.
I know. Let's highlight one of the people you'd hang out with.
Oh, one of the people that I'd probably want to talk to, Anna Oliver.
Ooh.
J.D. Oliver's wife.
Okay.
And that's maybe a little bit selfish, but having taken care of that house for so long.
Darn right.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, let's talk. Well, what are some questions? What would you ask her?
There's a lot of spaces in the house that have been remodeled and we don't have photos of them. Or
Okay.
A lot of things that the women in the house did philanthropically, or just their hobbies that we just don't have any records of because people didn't think that ladies' activities were important to keep. So when we're telling that story, I feel like there's kind of a big hole there of we can talk so much about the business and, the what it looks like now and how it got there, but we can't talk about, half of the people that live there and what they were interested in and what they did all day, other than just making guesses based on what people of the time did.
Right.
So I'd be like, tell me everything. What color is this room? Because it's all black and white.
That'd be great.
Is the story that I heard actually true?
There's probably some truth to everything, a little bit.
Yeah, and I'd also want to talk to some of the early settlers here. We, again, talk so much about the founding of the city and some of the first European folks that came here, but it certainly wasn't empty. So there were people like Leopold Pokagan that, tell me more about your story.
Right.
And so
I'd
have to make a list and go down that list.
I would too. It's hard. I've asked that a few times and I can't even decide myself.
Yeah.
But it probably just depends on what you're reading at the time, what you're researching at the time, what you're working on, and so that's a good one there. And now a brief message from me to you, my listeners. Folks, I need your help in spreading the good word about Round the Bend Now and Then with your friends and family who you think would enjoy it. I obviously want to grow the show and increase our listeners, but I also want to be sure that we share the good things that we learn about the people that I interview and their businesses, their organizations, books, etc. To share, all you have to do is copy the show's website, paste it in a text, and hit send to a friend. Or just tell them to Google Round the Bend Now and Then, and it's right there. Tell them that we're on all of the popular podcast apps like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and so forth. And while you're at it, tell them to download, like, or subscribe to the show on whatever podcast app that they're using. And if they're feeling especially squirrely, tell them to leave a review on why they love Round the Bend Now and Then. I thank you in advance for helping to spread the good word. And now, back to our episode. All right. Well, hey, we're going to dive into the History Museum a little bit more. And can you just provide our listeners just with a little bit of a historical context over the years? I mean, we don't need to go over details and dates, but the building opened here in mid-90s. But before that, it was in a few different spots and a few different names.
So we're actually the second oldest historical society in the state of Indiana.
Okay. Where's the oldest? Is it Indianapolis?
It's
probably.
Indianapolis
Okay.
Historical.
Well, still, second oldest. That's nice. Yeah.
Second oldest and second largest. They're the first. But they're nice folks. So
Yeah.
But started in 1867.
Ooh.
And has always been to preserve the history of the River Valley.
Okay.
And the people that lived here. And so we've gone through quite a few names. It was the Old Courthouse Museum for a long time because it was in the Old Courthouse.
Oh, it was called that?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. It was called the Old Courthouse Museum.
The Old Courthouse Museum.
To our listeners, it is the old courthouse that is next to the County City building on Lafayette Street.
That's correct.
Yep.
And so when we moved to this new building in 1994 to be on the same block as the Oliver Mansion, and also just a more modern and climate-controlled
facility, yes.
facility. It was the Northern Indiana Center for History. And again, I was an anthropology major, so I can talk about this kind of stuff. At the time, people thought that the word museum meant like old and dusty, and no one was going to want to come there. So Center for History. Yeah. But then they dropped the Northern Indiana because we also serve Southern Michigan. Okay. And it was just a Center for History. And then everybody was like, well, it's, we think it's an educational center, and then we don't know where's the actual museum. So then we changed it to the History Museum, straight and to the point. Yes. Though I will admit, not the most specific, because you have this conversation with people. Oh, I work at the History Museum. Oh, yeah, which one? Yeah. The one. Oh, yeah, I get it. So that's where we're at now. But for the last, we're actually, the Northern Indiana Historical Society is our parent organization. Okay. That's never changed. So whenever I make forever documents, I put you put that on there. But definitely. It's confusing to everyone. Yep. So that's kind of one of our things is we're the History Museum, and come see us. Yes, absolutely. That's what's most important. Just get out here. And when you do get out here, you mentioned it's not just this building too. It's kind of like a little campus. It is. You want to talk to me about that? Like what are some of the different buildings that we have going on campus here? So our museum is made up of 5 buildings that you can see here on the campus. And then also, of course, the Studebaker Museum. Yeah. So 2 museums for one low price. Absolutely. And so you got the Oliver Mansion in those 2 buildings. You've got what we call the History Center with, someday we'll have a better name for it. It could have your name on it. Yeah, there you go. We take cash and checks. I know you do. But, and then the Leighton Gallery, which is kind of part of just that whole long string of buildings here. Now, the museum is more of a campus than just one building. Next, we spend some time talking about a structure on the museum's campus called the Workers' Home. Kristie provides some historical context behind the home, and we discuss some of the plans for the future. I wanted to point this out here because the future plans are tied to the topic of a few of our recent episodes. I interviewed Gabrielle Robinson, the author of Better Homes of South Bend book, that shared the story of racial housing discrimination in the 1940s and 50s in South Bend, and how a group of African-American Studebaker factory workers banded together to form a corporation to purchase land and build homes in a much more desirable area. A few weeks ago, I shared a story behind the LaSalle Park neighborhood, better known as The Lake. Lynn Coleman joined me and described what it was like growing up there in the neighborhood. The neighborhood was literally built around a city dump, but many African-American families had no other choice but to live there. Next, you'll hear exactly how the plans for the Workers' Home is tied to those episodes. And also our workers' house, which is next to the parking lot, the White House over there, which has for the last almost 30 years been set as a Polish family's home during the Great Depression, which is interesting because when it first opened in 1994, it was actually supposed to change 5 years later to another ethnicity. The house was always meant to represent all the different
a worker peoples, here,
but that was a period when, as I understand, I was in high school. Oh, right, of course. What do I know? We, in efforts to save a little bit of money, laid off some of our staff and probably didn't have the resources to do that big change. Right. So finally, 30 years later, we're actually going to start that up again. Nice. And it will be closing at the end of the day on Labor Day. Oh, so literally next week. Literally on Monday. And reopening in November as an African-American family's home set in the 1950s. Nice. So we can talk about all kind of fun stuff. Like, would that be aligned to some of the like Better Homes
book with Gabrielle Robinson or aligned to even some of the redlining things going around here?
Exactly.
Okay.
So we
And they're doing the play at the
Yes.
South Bend Civic Theater in
You're
November?
on to me here.
Yes. Let's talk.
So we got a committee of a lot of different people in the community together to talk about how we'd want to do this and when we'd want to set it and what would make the most sense, and settled on the 50s, specifically to coincide with the Better Homes book. Cool. And that information to talk about that housing and redlining and kind of the beginnings of the civil rights movement in the area. And so the Better Homes play opens in early November at South Bend Civic, and then they're actually going to have a performance here later in November.
Really?
That will include a tour of the new house. And Gabrielle Robinson is on our committee also and will be part of that. So we're doing the play for schools, but then also a public performance. And the Undesign the Red Line exhibit that had been at the library and a few other places will be here as well. So
nice. So it's all kind of connecting.
And the Studebaker Museum is doing a little bit on Studebaker workers, African-American workers at Studebaker at the same time to, get this whole campus experience.
Right.
It'll be a really cool
That's neat.
thing to do. Yeah, I'm very excited.
That's really neat. And it's not just one little exhibit. That's a big deal, and it's a tough time in our history, but it's true, a lot of it,
It's true, and it's also can be very inspiring. Again, you learn from the risks that the people took to start this housing cooperative and make that better life for themselves. And we can use that opportunity to talk about, we've got this family, this fictional family that lives in this house, and we've done all these oral histories and talked to all these people who grew up in the Better Homes neighborhood or here on Washington Street at the time. And so what's Dad's story? He probably moved here to work at the Studebaker factory because they did all this recruiting. Maybe he plays in a blues band in the evening, and let's talk about the music scene in South Bend at the time. And maybe the kids are, into baseball and who are the big baseball players. And so you can kind of pull all these little pieces together and make a nice story.
And it truly makes it more authentic and connecting to because it's real life. With all the different buildings and everything going on, you have a lot of programs going on here, and you'd mentioned earlier you kind of oversee some of those. What are some different programs that the History Museum offers? Yeah,
we've always got something going on. So the things that my staff and myself are a little more involved in have to do with like our Kids First area, our kids programs. We have different things for kids to enjoy and also schools to come and see that have to do with natural history in the area with fossils and mammoths and mastodons, but also like the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And so that is a wonderful thing for us to be able to offer for not only schools, but, just our regular visitors.
Right.
And then as well, we have a monthly program called Insights in History, which has a historical topic that typically aligns with one of our exhibits. So you come here and you get a little lecture and you get a little tour and you usually get a cookie. So
hey, well, you can't beat
that.
For
$3, like you can't get anything for $3 today. So, and we do evening lectures. We have something called Mystery at the Mansion, where you take a tour of the house and there's actors and there's a mystery for you to solve as you listen to all of these people. And we just had Music in the Gardens a couple of times outside with we had 2 this year, one with the Whistle Pigs and the other with a band called Size Matters, and just a nice evening outside. There's always something to do here at the History Museum.
That's neat. Do you guys have any well, we just talked about in November what's coming up, but anything else coming up here? Anything around Christmas or anything else in the coming months?
So I mentioned Mystery at the Mansion. We have Christmas at Kopsche coming up, which is also a mansion-themed, heartwarming Christmas program.
Speaking of Mystery at the Mansion or Christmas at the Kopsche home, I had to spend some time asking about the Oliver Mansion. As you heard earlier, Kristie has been extensively involved with the mansion in recent years, and I wanted to provide our listeners with some cool behind-the-scenes info on the mansion. And as you're listening, Just remember that this mansion was built in the late 1800s, at a time when electricity was new and cars wouldn't dominate our streets for another few decades. Mr. Oliver, he was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big deal here in South Bend, and he was a big wig. Who or what nowadays could you kind of compare him to? I mean, even if it's not a specific person, but just in general on how, impactful he was in our area.
That's a great question because, and maybe I am a little too nitpicky on this, because if you think of people today who are kind of the big industrial, billionaires,
right,
they're not the same as they were
I got you.
when the Olivers were here. But especially in our area, we have a lot of really wonderful families who are very philanthropic and kind of put that money back into the community, like Ernie Racklin did, and her descendants, the Carmichael and the Murphys, and Art DCO did in Elkhart, and the Judd Layton Foundation does a lot of that kind of thing as well, and many others. So though J.D. Oliver was the richest man in Indiana, but also used his fortune, and his father did as well. They always said that, it was this town that made them what they are, and they want to make the town better because of it. So did things like the Oliver Hotel and the Opera House, and built housing, and funded the courthouse, and funded City Hall, and they said this town needs an opera house, and I'm going to make it happen. So we need a new City Hall. I will fund that.
That's crazy.
You guys can pay me back when you get to it.
Was it the one on Main Street? Was that the?
Yes.
Could have been.
That's not there anymore.
Yeah. Wow. So he was just more in tune, probably more in tune, connected to his city than a lot of folks are now.
I think so. And you see, these national corporations buying things in town, like the South Bend Tribune, or like
correct. Yeah, that's the opposite of keeping it local.
And so you don't kind of get as much of that investment as you did back when he was alive.
And first of all, the house is gorgeous. I mean, I've gone through several times, and I just always think about, gosh, what was this like in the late 1800s when it was, being built around here, and it's not like you had big cars going up and down the street and everything. And first of all, it had to have been quite the sight to be built.
Sure.
I mean, it had to have been quite the sight to see this thing being built. I was looking in the old South Bend Tribune articles, and they literally had like a diary. Every day there was some columns on the construction of it. I mean, they brought teams in from this here, from there. And so I just want to read an example just here. So it says frescoers. How do you, Fresco? You know how you would say that?
Oh, frescoers.
Frescoers, okay. The frescoers at the Oliver Mansion are doing some of the finest work ever seen in the West. The ceilings of several chambers are about completed, but the fine effects will be better appreciated when the walls are finished. The style is entirely new to this locality. It was a big deal at the time, though, wasn't it? Talk to me.
It was. That's great. I haven't seen all of those things. And now that, the Tribune is online and you can search like that, it makes it cool. So much easier.
Rabbit holes.
And so when the house was built, I know that they were noted for their Italian style, which I think was unusual in South Bend at the time. And again, that was probably Anna Oliver who put that all together.
And again, you'd want to talk to her. To get in her head.
We don't have... We have some letters back and forth between JD and the architect, but we don't have the correspondence with like the frescoers or like the interior designers that they hired and kind of how that went. But so those are some of the questions I would ask, is because it's typical for a house of that time to have painted ceilings with scenes, like cherubs and clouds, and ours doesn't. But there's definitely spaces that looks like it might have, and it probably did, but was painted over later on. You've probably never taken a picture of the ceiling in your house.
Nope.
So neither did the Olivers. So we don't have that information. So it was a grand house. Though we do have letters where JD is telling the architect, "Oh, you want a bronze front door? Well, that seems expensive. Let's make it oak instead."
Wow. Okay.
But wouldn't a bronze front door have been really cool?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't think he'd spare any expense, but
he
hey.
spared a lot of expenses, believe it or not.
Wow.
So we say on tours that it's a relatively modest home for a man of his social standing. And, Clem Studebaker's home, Tippecanoe Place, is almost twice as big. And was much more ornate.
Good point. It is larger.
It's got 2 dining rooms. It's got, the bowling alley in the basement. And the Oliver Mansion just didn't have those things, but would have guests from other businesses that he's trying to impress, or dignitaries from different countries. And so you wanted it to still be impressive and have kind of that height of technology.
Of course. Yeah. And his old factory was right down
right there.
Right up
you
the
could
road.
See it from the 3rd floor window.
Goodness. Is there anything about the house that would surprise people? Like any that people kind of shocked at?
Shocked at?
Not shocked, but any statistic. I don't know, anything.
Fun facts about the house that I like to share with you. It's one of the first homes in South Bend to have electricity. It was built with electricity.
It was not?
It was.
Okay, it was. Okay.
But it would only have been like your built-in light fixtures from the ceiling.
Yeah.
So when they added on as time went on and you want, things to plug in or something like that, they just added on to that original system.
Okay.
So we had to rewire the whole thing a couple of years ago, which was fun.
I'm sure.
Took a long time, but is a great thing to have done.
Yeah.
And I was also one of the first homes to have central heat. So it's got radiators, but it also has a forced air system, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're still using largely that original system.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And that is wild, and that's something we're looking to upgrade too. Yeah. But it works well enough for now.
I'm sure that's not going to be a cheap endeavor.
No.
My goodness.
No.
Now, when you guys were rewiring it, did you guys got into the walls and all that stuff? Did you find some things or no?
We did find some things.
Yeah.
We not anything that's going to make national news, but what we did find was mostly things like in the basement, like, there was a door here, or, there was a fire in this corner. You can see the charred wood in the ceiling, or the central vacuuming system is largely still in place, and we thought it was all gone.
Right.
Because we don't usually cut walls open unless we really need to.
Of course.
We found a lot of sardine tins from workers who just ate their lunch and threw the tin in the wall.
Wow.
Because who's going to know?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of fun. And... some other things like that.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember reading that it did get rewired a few years ago.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that. Is this scary to be in there alone?
I don't think so.
No?
But some people do.
Yeah?
I tell people I've been there at night. I've been there by myself at night. I had to sleep in the attic once.
Really?
Yeah. On Halloween, if the Olivers are going to haunt me, they've got better things to do than to bother me. I just ask them questions.
You would just hound them with nothing but questions. You'd ask Anna on her design plans, and they should be thankful that you're continuing on spreading the good word about their home.
I know,
right?
They know it's in good hands.
Exactly right.
We wrap up our talk in Kristie's office talking about a pretty important aspect of running a successful museum: money. I wanted to point this out because, as you'll hear, every dollar matters. You mentioned it earlier about funds and about money. What are some of the main ways that the History Museum operates with funds? Like how do you get your money?
How do we get our money? Begging. No,
Hey, absolutely.
So we have a lot of different, avenues of income, though the most major ones are generous donations from people in the community. So this fundraising gala that we have coming up is very important for us. But, we have an annual fund every year that it doesn't take, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to make a difference. Everybody, people giving us $5 still absolutely helps and counts. So admissions, of course, are very important. And a few we have a public program sponsors that are great. We get grant monies from things we apply for specific projects. We do have a little bit of funding from St. Joseph County. So this building that we're sitting in is owned by St. Joseph County. So they leased by us. So some of that is
partnership
helpful to us
there.
as well. And they've been great partners to us.
That's great.
And so lots of different things and all extremely important.
Yeah, so folks, get online, click a button, like she said.
Become a member.
There you go. Every penny counts, Every penny counts. Next, we hit the museum floor and we start at the Indiana lore exhibit. And as you'll hear, I got a bit creeped out. Side note, since we are walking around, holding our microphones, talking, walking, you'll hear a little bit of extra noise from the mics moving. But just don't pay it any attention. Oh, yes, this is larger. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's about 5,000 square feet gallery in here. Hazel McNally is one of my favorites in here. I don't know if you've heard of her.
No.
Yeah, so this lady was accused of killing her 2 children.
Hazel McNally
McNally, who was here in South Bend.
Okay.
And so she had these 2 children that she pushed around in a stroller.
Okay.
And then they were just gone. And her husband and neighbors were all very suspicious, and she was accused of killing them. And she said, no, I was never pregnant, and they were dolls all along. And
I'm getting kind of chills. Like, that's kind of freaky, that picture up there.
So that's her and her 2 dolls, and it went to court. And I'll tell you what, if you read like some of the newspaper stories, I think everybody was a little kooky in this one.
She was charged with double murder. Because that people saw her with 2 quote-unquote babies,
and her husband
and then disappeared.
Swore up and down that she was pregnant, and I held the baby, and she's like, no, that was a doll. And
wow. Because I'm looking at a picture right now of her holding 2, looks like babies, but those are dolls.
Those are dolls.
Those are freaky, and then there's dolls right there.
Yeah, those are in our collection.
Wow. I'll need to remember that. Hazel McNally.
So,
she kept the twins hidden.
Twins carefully hidden from curious eyes. And
oh my gosh.
And she said that her husband wanted children so badly that she invented 2 children. And they were always sleeping, and they were sensitive to sound, so you couldn't go in there and see them. Of
course.
How does your husband not notice?
How do you? That's crazy. I'm gonna need to look into that.
So
that's
look
nuts.
into it. It's an interesting story. And what is the answer? Who knows?
That's nuts.
It kind of was never definitively solved. So the judge decided that he had been the victim of a hoax, and she was let free.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, because those aren't real babies in that picture.
No.
Woo. I'm telling you, folks, you need to check this exhibit out. You take one look at that picture, and it gives you the heebie-jeebies. One of the big disappointments in downtown South Bend right now is the disrepaired state of the State Theater. I wish that somebody would step forward with the vision and the money to repurpose it, because if you haven't seen it, it is in dire shape. We talk about a part of the Indiana lore exhibit next that highlights the state. I see a picture of the State Theater there.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Let's see. The
Phantasm Flapper of the State Theater. Isn't that a fun bit of alliteration?
That's quite the word, Phantasm Flapper.
Yeah. So there's various stories of ghostly dancers from the 20s in the State Theater.
Okay. Did they party at the State when it was the nightclub?
Yeah, I guess.
I didn't see any of them there. When we were flapping on the dance floor in the early aughts, the Phantasm Flapper probably didn't like the music and didn't join us. There are many more exhibits at the museum, including one that has made the museum the national repository for all things related to the subject.
Yeah, this is a really popular thing. People like learning about the women's baseball, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that, the baseball.
Yeah, so we're actually the national repository for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
As made famous by the movie League of Their Own. Though, of course, deserving to be famous without a movie. But a lot of people didn't know anything about them until they learned it from Gina Davis. So, we're very fortunate to have this large collection of information about the league, stuff from the players, just all kind of really great things.
Right.
Photos, and that's one of our number one requested things for research here is girls baseball.
Really?
We were fortunate to actually provide some consulting with the Amazon Prime show that was on recently on their costuming because I guess they contacted the Library of Congress and the Library of Congress said, no, you need to call the History Museum.
That is cool.
So we were able to kind of show them original jackets and things like that to help them design costumes for the show.
That's neat.
So,
that is neat.
All 14 teams are highlighted in different ways here, and we like to change things to keep it fresh.
And then folks who have never seen or heard of where the ladies used to play, you would have no clue that there was a baseball field there. Now it's IUSB's dorms, apartments. When I was a kid, it was a golf course.
Yeah,
I've
heard that.
lit golf course.
WNIT just did a documentary.
They did.
Yeah.
I heard it was great. I haven't watched it yet. I need to, though.
It's pretty good. And not just because I'm in it, but
You're in it too?
I am.
Oh, yeah. We'll have to watch it. All right. And I did end up watching WNIT's documentary on Playland Amusement Park. And folks, you need to watch it. Not only because Kristie graces us with her presence and knowledge, but the documentary shares many stories and some cool old pictures of the park. So neat. And all about a half mile from where I'm recording at now. Again, there are many more exhibits on display at the History Museum, and we only highlighted a few here. I highly encourage you to spend some time visiting the museum yourself. We wrap up our talk on the museum floor with a conversation about an exhibit that Kristie is very proud of.
This Colfax Speaker for Freedom section is one of those things that we put in recently to highlight who I will argue is the most prominent person to come from South Bend. So here you can learn all about Schuyler Colfax and his time not only here as a newspaperman, as well as he was in Congress and then vice president. And again, the more you learn about something, the more interested you're in.
You go to rabbit holes learning
You do. And so what's really great about Colfax is he was campaigned almost exclusively on an anti-slavery stance. So whatever party he was in was the party that was the most anti-slavery. That was what he was for. And unlike a lot of politicians today who just want to get elected, you know, he was very firm on that.
He made a stance, and he
made
said,
a stand,
this is my stance.
And that's what he wanted to work on. So he said the proudest moment of his life was signing the 13th Amendment.
That's cool.
Which officially outlawed slavery in the United States, and as Speaker of the House at the time. So, and you can see that all through his history. But then he was implicated in a scandal called the Credit Mobilier scandal, which is a little bit complicated, and we won't go into that today. But and just really felt like the public totally turned on him, and later said when people was asking him if he would run for office again later. He's, and I put this quote in here, "I would not be a candidate for any office at any salary."
Wow. That's a big no.
Yeah.
So, at any salary.
Became a lecturer and liked to talk about his time as Speaker under Abraham Lincoln. And so we're fortunate to have something that I think is really
cool.
Which is his chair that he used as Speaker of the House. So that was made specially for the Speaker.
Okay.
In the Capitol building and kept by the Colfax family. It was actually gifted to him when he resigned as Speaker to become Vice President. And given to us in the 1940s.
That's neat.
As well as this gavel here, which was the gavel that was used by the Speaker of the Confederate House.
Okay.
And given to Colfax by Abraham Lincoln. So probably picked up when the Union soldiers came to the Confederate Capitol. And Lincoln said, well, here you go.
That's still though, isn't it?
That's
Lincoln
really,
touched it,
really
Colfax.
cool.
I mean, Thank you for listening to another episode of Round the Bend Now and Then. A special thanks to the History Museum for allowing me to visit and shine a spotlight on the museum. An extra special thanks to Deputy Executive Director Kristie Erickson. Kristie, thank you for your dedication and passion for the museum and for preserving our past. Your passion and your enthusiasm for what you do just shined the whole time we were meeting. You do such a great job of articulating and sharing all of the wonderful things going on at the History Museum. Folks, check out the History Museum's website for all types of information. www.historymuseumsb.org. I'll also include a link of the website in the show notes. You heard me mention all the cool pictures that they'll share on their social media from time to time. Be sure to follow them on all of their socials. On Facebook, The History Museum, or on Twitter, @HistoryMuseumSB. Lastly, as I ask you every week, please do me a favor. Leave a review on whatever podcast app that you listen to us on. Follow us on all of our socials, Twitter, Round the Bend Pod, and Facebook, Round the Bend Now and Then. As many of you have done, you can email me, roundthebend574@gmail.com. As always, please share the podcast with those that you feel would like us. Join us again next time as we learn more about South Bend and Mishawaka's now and then.